All right. Welcome, everyone, to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I am a Webmaster Trends Analyst, and I'm here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what we do is talk with webmasters, publishers, people like the ones here in the Hangouts. As always, I'd like to give a chance to anyone who's kind of new to these Hangouts to ask a first question if there's something on your mind.
In the matrix.
And let me mute you, Rob. All right. Otherwise, I'll just go run through the questions that were submitted. And if you have any comments or questions or further things to say on these topics, feel free to jump on in. And otherwise, we'll have more time for discussion towards the end. Would the recent 3xx redirect changes affect chained redirects? How is link juice being affected now? Would PageRank be distributed to the final destination or distributed across the redirects? So in general, with redirects and also with links, what we look at is the origin, so the canonical URL where things started, and the final destination. And essentially, this is a connection between those two. So what happens in between is less of an issue. However, obviously, from a user point of view, if you have multiple redirects that you're chaining after another, then that adds latency, especially on mobile devices. That could be a lot of latency. When it comes to Google and redirects, when we crawl those redirects, we tend to crawl, I think, 5 redirects in a row. And then if you have more redirects, which are kind of chained after another, then we'd have to reschedule that and look at that again at a later step. So that really kind of delays how we pick up new content. So as much as possible, the existing best practices still remain valid. So ideally, you would link or redirect between the original page and then directly to the final destination. You wouldn't focus so much on redirect chains. Anytime you add redirect chains, that's extra complexity. Things can go wrong. Like I mentioned, it also adds a lot of latency depending on the setup and the user. So ideally, keep things simple, keep things direct between the origin and the final destination.
John, can I just ask a quick question on that?
Sure.
Hello, sorry. Right, so we get lots of people who say, "Oh, I don't believe that," and it has an impact, etc. Is that potentially because, literally, it takes a few crawls, and you may go up and down whilst the 301 redirects are kind of being taken into consideration, and then the next crawl, a little bit more of that 301 redirection gets added, and so on and so forth, and it could just, as you say, just be the ups and downs of everything being calculated between schedules as such. So when people say, "Oh, I saw a ranking drop," it could be literally that they've got a few chains going on, and it just takes a little bit of time for everything to be recalculated over a number of visits by Googlebot.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you do a bigger change on your website, if you redirect a lot of URLs, if you go from one domain to another, if you change your site structure, then all of that does take time for things to settle down. So we can follow that pretty quickly. We can definitely forward the signals there, but that doesn't mean that it'll happen from one day to the next. So that
can have quite an impact on rankings, effectively.
Sure. I mean, anytime you do a site move, a site restructuring, that's something that will have at least a temporary effect on the site's visibility in search until everything is kind of understood again, and we know, oh, well, this URL is in context with this URL, and we can kind of understand that a little bit better. But essentially, any bigger change on a website takes time to settle down.
So maybe is it then a good idea when you're going to do that to sort of submit maybe a kind of new additional temporary XML sitemap with maybe the really important paging?
Sure. Yeah.
You're going to do a big job. Yeah.
I think we have that in the site move documentation. So if you're doing a redirect or a site move, restructuring, whatever, it makes sense to submit the old URLs and the new URLs with a new date so that we understand we can recrawl the old URLs because they have a new date. And we'll see that redirect to the new URLs. And we'll be able to take that into account with the new URLs.
But if you've got, as you say, so much crawl allocation, presumably it would perhaps be a really good idea to just, because you know you're not going to get everything visited maybe on the first migration move, to sort of just choose the really key pages and put those on there. If you've got a lot, I'm talking about a massive site, for instance.
You could do that. Probably in practice you wouldn't see a big difference if you did that. If you try to make it look like less is moving at the same time. Because usually what happens when we recognize that a site is moving, we'll try to recrawl more of it. Because we understand that bigger changes have happened, and we'd like to catch up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, thanks.
How will you process 3xx redirects? Will you reprocess them all and add any equity that was lost back to the new URLs, or is the no equity loss only for new redirects going forward? This has actually been in place for quite some time. So it's not that we have to kind of backfill any of this data. Is it a good idea to redirect pages with expired content, thousands of real estate listings, to help Google crawl more important pages, even if these pages have decent organic traffic? So if these are expired pages where essentially the user is landing on a page that says, oh, we can't sell you this product anymore, then that's kind of like a soft 404 page, which essentially should be treated like a 404 page. And if you have thousands of these pages, then I wouldn't redirect them unless you have a clear replacement for that URL. So just because this product that you're offering isn't available anymore doesn't mean that it makes sense to redirect to the home page by default. So that's something where you really want to look at the individual situations and say, well, is this other URL really a good replacement for the existing URL? Can I do a redirect and say, well, this is clearly what we should be showing instead? Or is this essentially just a 404 that you're trying to do with a redirect? And if you're essentially trying to do a 404 with a redirect, then what will happen is we'll pick that up as a soft 404 page, ideally, and say, oh, the webmaster probably did this wrong. We'll just treat it as a 404 on our side.
John, what about if you went into a category page? So say under blue shoes, you go to the blue shoes category page. Would that not be a good way to redirect it so it's not a 404?
Sometimes, but as a user, if you're looking for a specific type of shoe and you end up on a shoe category page, then that's probably not a great user experience, right? It's not really that you're offering something that replaces that existing page. So what might make sense there is just to have a better 404 page and just clearly say the product you were looking for doesn't exist anymore. Here are some similar products. Here's the category it was in, something like that.
What about PageRank? If you had PageRank going into that page, if it's a 404, the PageRank doesn't. Well, it won't feed into the page. But then if there is a redirect, then there's a possibility to keep that PageRank and keep that flowing into another page. Is it not therefore by PageRank definition to be better to redirect that into think?
Well, what will probably happen is we'll notice that you're redirecting to the category pages, and we'll see that as a soft 404 and essentially treat it as a 404 anyway.
John, if the
will that happen?
All right, Daniel. It's all right. Carry on.
Will that happen in most cases? Will it? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, will that happen in majority, if not all cases then? So if we have 404, probably not to worry about it. We have a lot of clients that have a lot of 404 pages that have been flagged from Webmaster Tools, and that's how we generally resolve it.
I don't know. I can't say majority or not. It's hard to say.
Okay.
I mean, it's something you would see in Search Console. We do flag these as soft 404 errors, and you'll see that flagged in Search Console as well.
Yeah. Okay. They've done as you were.
Yeah, sorry, it was just on the same subject, Daniel. You know, if there is such a if there is importance that comes from content relevance to a particular, you know, independent of a query, i.e. to a topic, if you're then 301 redirecting or sending 404s that say "our blue shoe" to shoes, presumably, regardless of page rank, you actually lose some kind of importance level. You know what I mean? Because it's not as important to that particular topic of blue shoes. So that's got it. Will that come into consideration? So effectively, you are losing something because you're losing like importance by irrelevance for a start.
I wouldn't think about it so much as relevance, but it's clear. Obviously, if you don't have that content anymore, then we can't rank that content anymore. So that's definitely one thing that you would lose there. It's not that suddenly the category page would rank for all of the content that was on the product page that you essentially removed. So if the content isn't there, we can't really take that into account for relevance. I mean, some of that we can pick up from the context of those pages, which is similar to if a page is blocked by robots text, then we can still rank that based on things like the anchor text and the links to those pages. But if you're removing something, then we generally don't have that available to actually rank.
Mm-hmm. OK. Yeah. Thanks.
Let me run through some more of these questions, and we'll definitely have more time for Q&A afterwards as well. Back in 2012, 2013, we had a manual penalty for unnatural links. Since at the moment we don't see any manual web spam penalty in our Search Console account, what can we do to send the reconsideration request, or the manual penalty expired by itself? Yes, probably the manual action has expired in the meantime. If there was a live manual action in place, then that's something you would see in Search Console in any case.
John,
Yes.
can I follow up on that question?
Sure.
So basically, back in 2012, we had the manual penalty. So it said at this point, we've migrated from HTTP to HTTPS, right? Mm-hmm. So the question was rather regarding whether the manual penalty moves from the HTTP to the HTTPS account, or is just expired considering the fact that we had it back in 2012?
I don't know if it would be automatically expired if it was from 2012, but manual actions are independent of HTTP, HTTPS, and www and non-www. Mm-hmm. So if there's a manual action on any of those 4 versions of your site, then that would be visible in your account.
OK, that's right. OK.
OK, we have a huge base of UK clients and want to start an affiliation program using a Magento pre-built module, which is the best practice to avoid being penalized by gaining backlinks from people that start to spread the word about us for getting paid. For affiliate links, we recommend using rel nofollow in the links. So if you're providing links for people to reuse, make sure you have the rel nofollow in that code snippet by default. That makes sure that we don't take those links into account, and then you wouldn't have any problems with that going forward from a web spam point of view.
Oh, can I make another follow-up on this one? Because it's the second one. I'm a first-time asker, even though I regularly take a look at the Hangouts.
Great.
The main problem that we face, I mean, the main risk that we try to avoid is having, I don't know, links shared by people without respecting, let's say, the no-follow rule that we set up by default. So that's the main problem that we face. Mm-hmm. So I know that we can provide them such a code so that the links they will start sharing will be no-followed. But what if some of them will modify the script that we offer?
Usually, so from a web spam point of view, if someone manually takes a look at this, they will look at the bigger picture. And if they see most of the people are doing it the way that they expect it with rel no follow, then that's fine. It's not that the web spam team is going to say, oh, this link here someone made without no follow, therefore we will penalize your website. They want to take a look at the bigger picture and see that for your website overall, things are working as expected.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but apart from the manual penalty that we had, we are currently under an algorithm penalty as well. Name it Penguin. So that's why we are really struggling to stay away from these kind of things, because we've cleaned a lot, quite a lot, and we've improved a lot the website inside the store and so on. So I was just afraid that once we launch the affiliation network, people will start and share without using the no-follow rule. So that's why even by that we can add some, I don't know, negative signers that were still playing by no rules. So that's why I really wanted to ask about it.
I mean, one thing, if you're worried about this, or if you see that some of your affiliates are doing this, maybe you can set up a script to double check the links that your site is getting to see that these have a no-follow attached. And the ones that don't, you can just put them in your disavow file. That's not something you would need to do every day, but if you have a tool that downloads all of your links and that automatically checks for no follow, if you can tell that these are affiliate links, then that should be fairly easy to just say, I take these domains, put them in my disavow file, and then I don't have to worry about it anymore. I think for most sites, it will be a fairly small list of people who don't use the snippets that you're using.
Okay, that's right. The last question regarding the affiliation, and I'm done. Do you see any problems with the links, with the affiliation links, that the people will start sharing on the social media and so on from this point of view? Because in that case, there's definitely no rule for no follow.
We don't use social media links for rankings. As far as I know, almost all of those networks use nofollow anyway, so that's not something you'd need to worry about.
Okay, that's right. Great.
John, I guess one alternative would be to use like a short link with a domain that goes to a robust txt file and blocks Google from following that link, so you don't care anymore about what people add or remove from them.
Yeah, you could do something like that. I have a feeling if you're just setting up a new program, then probably it's a bit overkill. But
yeah,
you could theoretically do something like that. I know some affiliate systems, some bigger ones, they do everything through these kind of jump domains that are blocked by robots text. But I think for the most part that's overkill, and it adds a lot of complexity. Things can go wrong either for the user, it adds latency. Things can go wrong for Google if suddenly we can crawl through that blocked domain. So I try to keep it as easy as possible until you really notice that you really need to take action. And with new affiliate programs, I see this less of a problem. With old affiliate programs where people have been using like no-followed links for years and years, then maybe that's something you need to kind of figure out a little bit better. But for something new, I suspect you won't have serious issues there.
Also, I guess that he mentioned also an algorithmic penalty, so that in the case of that and a migration to HTTPS, it would be a good idea to move the disavow file to the canonicalized version, which would be the HTTPS.
Yes, yes, or maybe just use the same disavow file for both, so that you don't have to worry about that.
We did that. We did that on both of them.
OK, great. All right, we're planning on A/B testing to a new site alongside the old site for 2 to 4 weeks. We don't want the test site indexed, So we're going to block it from Google. What would be the best way to do this without causing any SEO issues? We generally recommend using rel canonical for something like this. So if people are being redirected to the new site for an A/B test, and you also have the old version available for the A/B test, then just using a rel canonical to the preferred URLs usually helps us to kind of solve this. In practice, what can sometimes happen is that we'll index both of these versions for a brief period of time until we've processed the rel canonical. But in general, that's not going to be a problem. If 301 and 302 redirects don't diminish the SEO value that's passed to a new page, how does this apply to redirect chains? I think we talked about this briefly in the beginning. I'd still avoid doing redirect chains as much as possible. They add complexity, they room for error, and of course, extra latency. How many Pokemon did you catch? Which level are you? Yeah, time for the serious questions.
Given up.
I think I'm just like level 18 or something like that. Not a professional player. Would you say?
That's quite good. That's very good, John. I'm only a level 11.
OK.
I'm only 9.
All right. Maybe I am more professional than you with Pokemon, at least. Or I just have a longer commute. You know, it's easy to pick those up on the way home. Would you say that to remove Panda, I should check out query data from Search Console and try to provide the best user experience overall? And to completely align intent of my content to the intent of users, how often should do smaller site-wide algorithms refresh? So I think it's always a good idea to align what your users want with what you're providing. So regardless of any algorithm on our side, if you see that your users want something and that's something that you could offer, then make sure that your offer is really as compelling as possible and matches what users want. I think that's one of the things that a lot of smaller businesses have trouble with, especially that they'll just essentially put a website up that's kind of like a business card, and they don't really align what they provide on their website with what users want, where they have a unique niche that they can focus on. So that's something I would do regardless of any algorithm. That's something that I assume many of our quality algorithms are looking for anyway, where they're trying to see, well, does this really fulfill a user's needs? And if it doesn't fulfill the user's needs, why are we showing it in the search results? How often these algorithms refresh, it's very broad. I guess some of them refresh fairly quickly when we recrawl pages. Some of them take a little bit longer when they need to kind of aggregate more data together to make a decision. So that's something that it varies. We've recently migrated HTTP to HTTPS. Pages are not getting crawled and re-indexed as good as HTTP. Almost 4 months passed. How can we make them as easy as I had with HTTP? It's hard to say without looking at the specific case here. So we do have general guidance on site moves with URL changes in our Help Center. So I definitely go through that and double check to make sure that you have all of that covered. Somewhere there's a little bit of noise in the background. Let me just mute the rest of you here. Maybe that helps. Maybe not. We'll see. Oh, there we go. OK. We're seeing duplicate content in Search Console for 2 URLs which are identical except from a tracking parameter. How can we avoid the duplicate flag? Can the crawling of the link with the tracking parameters be avoided by amending the robots text file? So when it comes to duplicate content, we recommend using 301 redirects, if possible, using rel canonical, making sure that you have clean internal linking, and being consistent with the URLs that you're using, so that the ones you're using in internal links also match what you're submitting with sitemaps, what you're using as canonical, what you're using for hreflang, etc. So those are kind of the options that we have available there. I wouldn't recommend using robots text to block crawling of duplicate content, except for extreme cases where where the server is really having trouble keeping up because of crawling of like tracking parameters, for example. But in general, I just use those other methods. The main reason not to use a robots text for blocking of duplicate content is because we can't recognize that it's actually duplicate content then. What will happen is we'll be able to crawl one of your URLs on your website. We'll find the other one. We'll see that it's blocked by robots text, and we'll assume that there's actually useful content there. So we'll have, on the one hand, your URL from your website, and on the other hand, the URL that's blocked by robots text, and we'll probably index both of them. Whereas if we can find a rel canonical on those pages, if we can crawl that page and see that it's actually the same content, then we'll be able to crawl both of these URLs, see, oh, actually it's the same one. We'll fold all of the signals into one. So that's essentially the main reason why we recommend not using robots text for duplicate content. There might be some extreme situations where crawling parameters actually makes it really hard for your server. And ideally, that's something you'd solve by making us not run into those parameterized URLs. But in the meantime, sometimes it kind of makes sense to force Google to stop crawling those URLs so that you have time to kind of breathe and figure out the problem.
John, what about blogs, like tagging category pages? Would you block tag? Because generally tag and category style URLs are just duplicates. Now, I would generally block them because I don't see the purpose of having them. But what would you suggest? Would you say I'd still allow the tag and category pages to be crawled, or?
I think it depends on the type of content that you have available there. For some sites, I could see those category pages being a good overview. For other sites, it's essentially just a list of the existing other blog posts and doesn't really provide extra value. So that's kind of up to you to figure out, does this URL kind of stand on its own, provide extra value, or is it essentially just a duplication of what else we've seen before?
OK, thank you.
John, sorry everybody. Just on that subject, I had a question actually, but it actually falls into that kind of subject of duplicate body content. So not taking into consideration boilerplate areas, for instance, but the actual, say you have maybe, I don't know, a listing site or you know, some sort of directory site, and you can find that there's an awful lot of body content snippets, if you like, that are in various sections. How is that treated? I mean, is that literally the first time it's found is the URL that body content will be attributed to, and then pretty much everything after that, it just is not included? How does that work? Overall, you know, I'm talking about dynamic sites, really. Because you get an awful lot of sites that are sort of churning out the same kind of content, but in different views almost. I just wondered where the actual attribution for that content would first be placed. Would it be like the first place it's discovered?
It depends. It's not that easy. So, I mean, one of the difficulties with taking blindly the first discovery is that sometimes we'll discover it in a place where it's not actually that relevant. So that's something that can sometimes happen. So we try to take various signals to figure out which URL is really the relevant one for this one. And that includes the normal canonicalization stuff that I mentioned before. It also looks at maybe the site overall and the URLs overall, the content that we have available there, the URL structure on a website to see if this kind of fits together.
But I suppose this is where you can end up with real issues with lots of pages jumping around for a particular term, because as Google's kind of discovering effectively that same piece of content and then thinking, oh, actually, it's a little bit more relevant to there than it was on the previous one, you can end up, I suppose, with this like up and down, and maybe sometimes product pages outranking subcategories and categories, and some kind of reused, repurposed content as such that's relevant to it all, but maybe on occasion more relevant to bits.
Maybe. I mean, it really depends on the website, but that's the kind of situation where you probably want to kind of take a look at the content that you're providing there and give Google some guidance as well, where you don't want Google's algorithms to just like take this pile of content and figure it out. You probably have ideas of what you really want indexed and what you want shown in search, and make sure to kind of give those ideas to Google by using proper canonicals and all of those techniques. So in a case where we do get just like this big unstructured pile of content with different pages and mixtures of the content, then that could theoretically jump around a little bit until we've kind of settled down and figured it out. But ideally, you don't even want to go into that situation where you end up giving Google this unstructured pile of content. You want to kind of give context, make sure that it's easy to understand, make sure that it's easy to kind of follow your guidance and index the content that you do want to have indexed.
So this is where things like really good organized XMLs, etc., help.
Sure, yeah. I mean, anything that you can do to give more context to the content, to make it easy to focus on the primary content, all of that helps.
Mm-hmm. OK, thanks.
John?
Yes?
Page load speed. I've been looking at the analytics page load speed, and it doesn't sort of tie in with kind of how I'm timing it on the PC, but we've gone Retina image friendly on the new website we've just done for somebody. So there's a lot of big imagery on the home page. Are we going to get sort of penalized for serving up Retina friendly images to Retina computers that may have poor broadband speeds? How does it kind of work in that level?
Good question. So we don't penalize websites for page speed when it's kind of within a normal range. So when it comes to speed and rankings, we mostly look at, is this kind of reasonable, or is this like way out of the ballpark? Does it take like several minutes to load? And if these are kind of reasonable pages, they're loading reasonably, then the difference between the page load time is mostly something that you would see indirectly, where users are spending more time on your site. They're converting better. They're buying things on your website. So that's one place.
The signs are good.
Really
we've just gone over from Magento to WordPress, and the sales are up. The page loads, we've gone for a dedicated server, so we've really gone for the whole hog just for an individual website. Average page load speed's about 2 seconds mainly. Home page is 4, but there's more images to be seen. But we think the user experience is pretty good if you're using the latest technology to view those imageries. It really does look good. So, and people are phoning us up saying site looks good, which is to us it's the ultimate sort of satisfaction.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Great job. But it's took nearly 12 months to get us there. So it's been a long job. So but we're quite proud of it. But I mean, there's some weird things going on. We're worried about the 404s, but we've redirected all the old category pages, the old product pages. But there's a whole host of other pages that we haven't kind of worried about because they're just like cart pages, and we don't even understand the sort of structure of what Magento was doing. So we've kind of left them. So we've just got to see what happens, I guess. We've told Webmaster Tools that we're on a new secure website. It's fully HTTPS. So hopefully you're going to see it in there that you'll be happy with the structure eventually. So I mean, overall, I think we're quite happy, but you do get these initial panics, don't you? These sort of,
I think anytime you do a big site restructuring like that, you will see fluctuations, and it will take some time to kind of settle down. And finding the right URLs to redirect is kind of important, so that we can follow all of those redirects to the right place. I'd also watch out for images. So if you have product images that were ranking in image search, then make sure that those image URLs are also redirecting to
his
the right one.
ranking over 5 years went from really good down to really bad. So we're hoping the changeover is going to help. He does rely heavily on AdWords, so which is fine because that means he's guaranteed that he's got a very good AdWords team that look after his business. So that's good, So that takes a bit of the dependency away from organic, So so we can sit on things for a little while with no panic,
That's good.
But I mean, we're a little bit worried about the keyword density. On his business name is one of the keywords that you would want to be found on. So it appears 8 times in the home page, and I'm a bit worried that's a bit high.
I wouldn't worry about that.
No,
I think that's fine.
I mean, it doesn't. We don't get found for the main term at all. Yeah, all the longer permutations of that keyword were page 1 everywhere, but the shortened version were absolutely nowhere. But I thought, well, let's just leave it 2 or 3 months, see what happens.
Yeah. I think if you're doing a site restructuring, you kind of need to double check that from a technical point of view you're doing things right. The redirects, kind of keeping track of those and really making sure that they're all set up properly, that's important. And then at some point, it really just needs time to settle down. And these are things that do sometimes take a month or two to kind of catch up a bit.
Yeah.
So that's.
Do you recommend Google Shopping? Is that a new? I mean, we keep looking at that. It seems to be appearing more and more now that AdWords has restructured how they do their structuring on the page 1. They've lessened what you can have, but Shopping seems to have taken that position. So is that? I mean, do any of the guys there use it? Does any of the
I use it quite a bit to buy stuff, but I have no idea how things are working on the ad side. We have a really strict separation when it comes to organic search and ads, so I have no idea what people are doing internally at Google in the ad space, so I can't really give you advice.
Yeah. No, fair enough. Thank you.
All right, next question here. With regards to mobile version next to a desktop version, which recommendations would you give related to canonical tag and hreflang attributes? So you want to use the same URLs for desktop and mobile version. So this is easy. If you want to use the same URLs for desktop and mobile, then the canonical would point at that canonical URL that you use for the desktop and mobile version. So that could be if you're using responsive design, or it could be if you're using so-called dynamic serving, where depending on the device, you serve different content to the user. For hreflang, if you have multiple language versions that are equivalent, then you would make those hreflang links between the canonical versions of those URLs that you have. If you had separate mobile URLs, then the hreflang tag would be between the desktop versions, because that's the one we recommend as a canonical version at the moment. And like you mentioned there, if you're using the same URLs, and obviously all of this is a little bit easier. You don't have to worry about redirects. You don't have to worry about which of these versions do I have to link together. You have one URL that's valid for desktop and mobile. The number of website pages indexed should be equal or close to the number of pages that are presented in Google search results. Large disparities in this ratio could mean the site has duplicate pages or other errors. Is that true? I don't think that's always the case. I could imagine that sometimes this aligns, but it's probably more accidental than on purpose. The number of URLs that we show in search can be very different to the number of URLs that is actually indexed. Sometimes what will happen is we'll recrawl a really big website, but we don't show a lot of those URLs in search because they're really rarely searched for. So that can be perfectly fine. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a lot of duplicate content. One place you could use to kind of roughly see if there's a lot of duplicate content is if you work with a sitemap file, where you know in the sitemap file you have all of the unique URLs listed, And if you compare that number to the index status number in Search Console, for example, then sometimes a large difference there can point at issues with regards to duplication that's accidentally indexed, maybe parameter URLs that are kind of going haywire, or calendar entries where we can crawl into the year 29,000, those kind of things. But in general, I wouldn't blindly just look at any of these numbers and say, oh, these numbers don't match, therefore it must be this specific problem. It's really something where you have to take your experience and look at what you find and say, well, this could mean any number of things. It might be completely normal, but I will check the most common issues. Regarding Search Console, how frequently does a security check function get invoked for a site? Do you scan a site when you index it, or is it on another schedule? How good is it at finding issues? So I imagine with security check, you mean the malware reviews. That's something that's done independently of search crawling and indexing. So that, depending on the site, can be crawled and checked more frequently or less frequently. There's no fixed schedule there. Is it possible to get penalized for 302 redirecting hundreds of part URLs to a website? We sometimes see this happening where people buy a bunch of part domains and try to redirect them to another domain in the hope that they can get some value out of that. And in general, our algorithms are pretty good at catching that and making sure that it doesn't have any effect. So it's probably not the case that you'd get a manual web spam action for that, but I'm sure our algorithms would spot that and kind of take that into account accordingly. Can you be penalized for oversaturating your internal linking anchor text? Not that I'm aware of. What will probably happen is we'll notice that as keyword stuffing, and our algorithms will say, oh, these keywords appear so often on this web page, therefore maybe they're not really so useful for this page at all. Maybe this is just stuffed content. So that's something where you wouldn't see a manual web spam action just for kind of over-optimized internal linking, but I doubt you'd see a big advantage of that either. To be able to be an authority, what should small business owners do so that Google considers them an authority? That's really hard. That's almost like a marketing question, I'd say, and less of an SEO question. So that's something where you, as a business owner, I think have to be able to find that niche where you are an authority, or where you do have something unique and compelling to provide to users. So finding that niche and making sure that you can really do the best job you can for that niche, that's tricky, and that's not like a simple SEO question.
John?
Yes?
Quick question. We've got another client who is in the fashion industry. We're looking at getting affiliates to blog and write about our products. We're looking at that site that way rather than be the affiliate. Is there any serious no-nos that we should, make by making them do no-follow links, and because they would be a monitored, there's going to be an agency that says this person is good enough to do it for you, and these 10 aren't, so that would be sort of taken, so it'd be high quality, we hope. But is there a serious no-no that you just say, yeah, no-follow links, and because we don't want sort of spam links suddenly appearing?
Yeah, I would definitely use nofollow on those links, because those links would be appearing because of your relationship with those bloggers. Yeah. So definitely nofollow them. But apart from that, I think that's essentially up to you.
Yeah.
So I think there's general guidance in that people should just disclose when they're writing about something and being paid for that, for example. But when it comes to links, when it comes to SEO, our main issue is really if these links are being placed there because of a relationship and they're passing PageRank, then that would be a problem for us.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of a related question. Got a site, got the GB folder structure, the ES folder structure, so the targeted international sections. If you were to, say, promote, say, the ES or the Spanish section, or you were to get links, and you need to do it for the other sections, they're all connected via hreflang tags anyway, but by having links into one version of the page or area, do you need to, would I need the UK market and maybe in the Spanish market because the site's split that way? How does that work exactly? Or do I just, for multiples?
Yeah, I mean, we essentially just follow the internal links. So if your site has different sections and they're linked across each other, and one section gets links from externally, then we follow the internal links to the rest of your site, and we kind of distribute PageRank and other signals that way.
So if you've got different, the same page in different languages connected with the hreflang tags, then is that treated the same? I mean, I remember when we spoke about it before. It's essentially the same page, all multiples of the same page. The URL just gets swapped out, or is it? Yeah. Is there an element of that? But there is also an element whereby you're getting links into, say, the Spanish page that is probably somehow connected to the English version of that page because of the hreflang tag. Therefore, the PageRank will get distributed in this, as if it was a link.
No, it would really need to be a link between those pages.
Right. Okay. Otherwise, you say if you had the four the same thing, in different languages, one page will be stronger over, more stronger over another, and obviously depending on what search engine it's sent to, that is. Okay, that makes sense.
That's kind of normal. I mean, just because you're like the top brand in the UK, for example, wouldn't necessarily mean that we should always show your German site to German users. Okay. So the individual language and location versions, they kind of have to build up their value on their own as well. The hreflang helps us if we accidentally show the wrong version. So if someone in Germany were to otherwise see the UK page and we know the connection between the UK and the German page, then we can swap that out. But it won't necessarily mean that the German page will suddenly be much stronger.
But if you were to have, say, sites in Germany, that's with in that country.
I didn't get that. It's like you're breaking up from the sound.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better, yeah.
I know, it's the internet. So I've got a German page and I'm getting German links. Can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah. German page, links into the German page from Germany. So we've got German links going into a German page. That's going to help with the authority of that page. Rather than having UK links into a German page, we've got German links going into a German page because that's increasing kind of that locality of that page. It's more geo-targeted, it's more relevant because we've got German links going into the German page. We've got Spanish links going into a Spanish page. So is that, that's going to help with generating or building the authority of these different pages. The same thing.
It generally makes sense, even just because of the anchor text. So if you have English language anchor text going to your German pages, then that's going to be a bit confusing for us because we don't really know what that's supposed to be for. So I mean, in a natural situation, that happens anyway. So it's not something where you'd need to kind of like manually guide these 5 links here, these 5 links there, that kind of thing.
It's just trying to understand that, I think, that if you were to, you advertise and promote your site in different countries and naturally going to get links, but you want the right links going to the right areas, I suppose, to make you get the maximum benefit from it.
I mean, that's something you'd naturally do anyway. If you promote your site in Germany, you'd promote the German site. You wouldn't promote the UK site in Germany. That wouldn't really make sense.
Yeah, and again, you understand this is part of the same site. It's just under a folder structure, /. Yeah. No, that's cool, and you've answered my question, so thank you. I won't talk about any more of your time.
All right.
Just quickly on that question of international sites that are pretty much, as Daniel said, say domain /en, es, blah, 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 blah. So say a site has originally had lots and lots of international separate domains or even subdomains, and they've at 301 redirect or migrated the whole site across to folders, internationalized folders. And then you find that when you sort of start to analyze things like server logs, what's happening is, you know, you get this top right-hand thing where people can flick between the site, etc. Yeah, that you end up with Googlebot just immediately going straight from the existing site that you started from, and then off into like all these different folders. Can that have kind of detrimental effects? You know, just having that sort of top right, you know, these are all the different versions of this site, and you know, sort of some love tends to go to some folders over others, maybe.
I don't see any problem with that. I think that's kind of a logical site structure, one that we're kind of used to. So I think that can be perfectly fine.
Right. So even though it just literally comes at, you know, when you look at the logs, it's literally in at the top of the site, doesn't actually crawl any of the sort of English version and just goes straight off to the Spanish version.
I think that can happen. I mean, the way Googlebot crawls isn't necessarily representative of what we think is the most important on a site and what we think is the content that will show the most from the site. So especially with a new website, the crawling pattern can be really weird sometimes. If we don't have a lot of information about the site, then sometimes we just like dive in and start in one edge and try to pick everything up. And once we've crawled and indexed pretty much everything, then we can kind of settle back down into kind of a more natural crawling speed where we say, well, these are the pages that are changing frequently, therefore we'll crawl them more frequently. And these are the pages that we think are changing less frequently, therefore we can crawl them less frequently. So that's, I think, kind of the difference between the initial crawling and kind of the stable state that settles down after a while. I think that's completely normal.
Mm. And say a version of the site has more links, then it's likely to get more of the crawl.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes.
Mm. OK. All right, thanks.
Let's see. Is it possible that Google's algorithms like Panda may count Google Adsense match content JavaScript as another ad unit? I use 2 match content units, 1 in the sidebar, 1 in the footer, 3 Adsense, 2 match content units. Is that too much? In general, we don't crawl these ad units or the content in these ad units. So that's something that where we wouldn't take that content in there into account. With regards to too many or not, that's more of an issue between you and your users, or you and the ad policies, if there are policies around the number of units that you can use per page, something like that, rather than a direct SEO issue. Many e-commerce sites prioritize product listings on the category and product pages, but they want to make use of text contents power 2 and add relevant text near the footer. But isn't the text above the fold more valuable than the text on the footer? Not necessarily. So one thing that I see, especially e-commerce sites do, is they fill up the page with stuffed content, essentially. So if you scroll all the way down to one of their category pages, you'll find all of these different products and different product categories. And then there's this gigantic block of text, which is just essentially gibberish, auto-generated content, or like sentences copied from elsewhere with keywords and keywords that are linked. And they usually feel that this really helps their site rank. And in general, what happens is we recognize this block of text, understand that this is essentially just filling, and we ignore it. So that's something where they think they're doing something for SEO, but it doesn't actually help. So that's the type of thing I would essentially just drop from the site and focus on the main content instead, so that we can kind of treat your site as a normal website and understand that what you're providing on your pages is actually relevant to users and something that we can show. So instead of putting this text pile on there, be it in the footer or in the header, I'd really make sure that you kind of provide content that people actually read and that they actually use when they look at your website.
John, regarding that question, we usually actually recommend for e-commerce websites or categories to provide at least maybe 1 or 2 sentences to kind of explain to the user, and so Google also understands better what the page is about, so we don't need to create subcategories and things like that where it doesn't make sense. But some clients, prefer, let's just put that in the footer so it doesn't drop the product listing out of the fold or something like that. And obviously that is no longer really user-friendly, and we're also worried from Google's point of view that they'll see the text all the way, like after 100 scrolls or something like that, and and Google will take it less into consideration just because it's way down in the page. Although we see it is indexed, we're just worried that it has less of an impact if it's all the way close to the footer or something like that.
So let me ask you, do you think it has less value to users?
If it's in the footer, yes.
So I mean, if it's something that you think is important for your pages, for your users, then I put it somewhere where they can actually see it. So that's, I mean, that's something where, like, the location for Googlebot is one thing, but if you really think this is relevant content, then make sure that people can actually find it and read it, and then it'll be easier for us to take into account as well. I mean, generally, we'd probably still take that into account and say, well, it's on the page. It's like not hidden content. We take it into account somehow, but if you're treating it as something that's like third-class citizen on the page, that like you don't really want users to actually read this, then maybe it's not that important on the page. Maybe Googlebot and users can figure out the context from the rest of the content too.
Well, especially for Romanian clients, we noticed that in some cases Googlebot isn't really good at determining synonyms. So, for example, in the fashion industry, women are also referred to as dames, the Romanian equivalent. So a lot of keyword searches are for dames' shoes rather than women's shoes. But they're essentially the same thing, yet Google doesn't see a connection between them for some reason. So we're ranking very well for dames' shoes, but not at all for women's shoes, and things like that. So we think that adding some sort of a bit of description, 1 or 2 sentences that you can include, just as Matt Katz gave a couple of years ago an example with the thumb drive and USB, and how you can mention to users and Google that it's the same thing. But the client also says that, well, users come to the page, they know what this is about, why should we add that extra content?
Yeah.
So we have a lot of things to take into account. So
yeah. I mean, in a case like yours, I don't see that as being as problematic as some of the other e-commerce sites that we run across, where you scroll to the bottom and it's really like in 5-pixel font. It's like this big pile of text that, I don't know, bigger than the Wikipedia article for that topic. And you're like, well, what is this for? Users can't read it, and search engines will recognize that it's just a pile of stuffed text. So what kind of value are you getting out of this compared to even just the maintenance hurdle of kind of keeping that up to date, making sure that it doesn't break the rest of the pages? But it's something where you have to find the right balance. And sometimes it makes sense to have like a heading and a subheading on top to make it clear what the pages are about. Sometimes it's something that you can put in between where you say, well, this is this topic, this is another topic, or internal linking where you use the synonyms as well might be an idea. You kind of have to take your experience, and instead of trying to go the simple way by just stuffing all the keywords into the footer, make sure you're actually doing something reasonable with that.
OK, but generally speaking, Google might guide itself like a user would. So a content that is hard to see or takes a long time to reach it might not value as much versus a content that's right in your face when you load the page.
I think at the moment we mostly differentiate between hidden content and visible content. So we probably wouldn't look into how far down on a page it is. But in an ideal situation, our algorithms would kind of recognize something like that and say, well, this is probably less relevant because it is really small or it is really far down on the page. We could still rank those pages because of that content, but it might not be the primary content.
Right, exactly. So the client has added them but to the footer, and we see that they are ranking for the content that is there. We're just wondering, well, why not put it higher up? Users can see it as well, and maybe Google will give it more ranking value or something like that.
I don't know if you would notice any measurable difference with regards to rankings there, but you probably would see some measurable difference between the way users react to a page like that, where maybe they can understand things better, maybe it confuses them. It's something to kind of try out there. And with A/B testing, this is
so it might have more of an indirect impact. So
yeah.
John, if we wanted to run a blog on the website, but we didn't want the blog to be on the same part of the same domain. I know it sounds stupid when you're using a WordPress site, but we didn't want to touch the main structure of that WordPress site because we've done so much work. We just don't want to risk, break-in plugins, etc. And so, what would be the best way to have a blog posts? Would it be to create a new subdomain of that domain, so we can put an entirely brand new structure up, and of a blog, and so then the blog link on the website would go to the subdomain, and we wouldn't get penalized because we don't want to be a gateway website, where if we set up a new website just to blog on, and all the links went back to the main website, that's just a doorway gateway website, isn't it? So how would we go about it? Is a subdomain safer to do that, or?
Subdomain sounds like a good way to do that, yeah. I mean, sometimes there are technical kind of limitations that you're stuck with, where you can say, well, subdirectory doesn't work for technical reasons, but maybe a subdomain works.
Yeah.
So the one thing I'd watch out for with subdomains is that you're not creating an infinite number of them or a large number of them, because that makes crawling a little bit harder. But if you have like 2 or 3...
The owner has a huge value on his business. He has an in-depth knowledge. It's a very niche business, and we're trying to convince him to put that into blogging, because it will get people. In his industry, there's only probably about 3 or 4 companies blogging.
Sure.
The value they can add to the customer is absolutely huge. It saves them phoning up the company.
That's fantastic. So, yeah, do that.
We need him to do it, but I just said don't want to mess with the actual main website after spending 9 months on developers doing because we have to have all this stuff indexed and stuff for the government. It's ridiculous, so we're a little bit hands off, and let's be safe,
Sure.
So obviously I could put it on another website, and it's just how we put that on another website, start again, and just be safe. But I just thought subdomain should be, but we won't get penalized if we're backlinking.
I think even if you put it on a separate domain, that would be fine. So that's not something where the manual web spam team would say, oh, this blog is linking to this shop or something like that.
Sure.
We would recognize that as kind of belonging together and be able to treat that together.
I mean, obviously the blog link on the website would be going to that, so the two would be interlinked.
That's fine. Yeah. That's completely normal. I wouldn't worry about that. I'd pick whatever works best from a technical point of view. I think a subdomain kind of brings the message across to users that this really belongs to that main domain. And if you can bring more of that knowledge online, I think that's always a win.
Yeah. And next is getting on video, but that's another.
Yeah, videos are really popular.
Yeah. Well.
You could do like hangout with them. I've heard people do that.
Yeah, it's like this. This is a source of information, isn't it? So.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. We're kind of at the end from the time. I see we still have a ton of questions submitted. If I didn't get to your question, feel free to copy it into one of the next Hangouts. I'll be setting up the next ones probably today or early next week. One thing I'll do is try to move this Friday one forward an hour or two so that we have a chance to get more of the people from Australia, Japan, India as well to join in. I realize this might make it a little bit tricky for some of you in the UK, but maybe you can grab an extra coffee in the morning.
All managed.
All right. So with that, I wish you all a great weekend. Thank you all for joining in. Thanks for all of the questions, and see you one of the future times.
Thanks.
Bye all.
Thanks, John.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.